Hello and welcome. My name is Kirigin, and my goal is to help founders by talking to people with incredible experiences. And today I'm delighted to bring you a conversation with Ryan Carlson, the CMO at Okta. And here we cover how he got the job with a really good lesson on persistence and how Okta evolved from an enterprise company to one that includes a developer-facing product and how to tell that story. And we cover how to measure marketing across many different channels, including an enormous user conference, and how to run such a conference when everyone's on lockdown, and also why to run such a conference with a surprising answer. And we also talk a bit about how to hire someone like him. And I really enjoyed this conversation with Ryan, and I think you will too. And so without further ado, I bring you Ryan Carlson. All right, today I am joined by Ryan Carlson, the Chief Marketing Officer at Okta. Ryan, thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's good to see you again. You and I first met back in 2008 when you and Abby had your startup, and I was trying to do a startup with my wife, and we reached out and compared notes on what it was like to be husband and wife founders. Our company didn't work out, but I'm glad our marriage still did. And
we're in the same boat. I'm still married. That's good. And I get that question actually a fair amount as to what it's like to be married to your co-founder. My biggest problem was that we'd always talk about work is like the only thing that we talked about. So making time for the marriage is, so talk about something else is the best advice out here. I would love to dive in, and that's actually a great starting point. So we met before you started this journey at Okta, and you've been at Okta for almost 9 years.
That's right.
Yeah, so I'd love to hear a bit about that timeline, sort of how you came to join the company, which I think was around Series B, and what the last, 9 years is a very long time, from like Series B, C, D, E, F, I want to say then.
We did an F,
yeah.
Yep.
So can you talk through a little bit about team size and what marketing is like at those different stages?
Yeah. I'll give you like the 30-second version of, my career before Okta and how I found them. And it's just, to me, a lot of people talk about their careers and it was all planned and they had these really key moves they made and these decisions, and they really don't really talk about the luck factor. And for me, like, luck plays a huge role in my story of getting to Okta. I came to Silicon Valley a long time ago, armed with an electrical engineering degree and no knowledge about anything. I didn't know that startups existed. I didn't know anything about venture capital. I came to Silicon Valley because if you study electrical engineering, that's where you should be. And I started my career in semiconductors, and then worked at big companies and startups in that space, networking companies, building control system company. And I was always, even though I didn't know anything about Silicon Valley, I quickly found product marketing as a job. If you're technical and you're working on a technical product, then product marketing is, and you like the business side, product marketing is a really good role. And then moved into product management and was really running product at whatever company I was at. And so before Okta, I was running product at a venture-backed company building an intelligent building control system. And it was really interesting technology, but it wasn't scaling that fast. We eventually sold the company, but it wasn't hyper growth. And then, I love, I read a ton of VCs, and I love reading Ben Horowitz. I read everything that he's written. And he wrote a post about their first cloud investment. And this was early on for Andreessen Horowitz. In fact, Okta was their first ever investment. They did the seed round at Okta, but he wrote a post about the Series A. And I thought, wow, Ben and Mark investing in their first cloud investment is Okta. That must mean something, given their background at Loud Cloud and Opsware. And so, of course, I go and look at the company. It looks interesting. They have a job opening. They have a head of product job opening. So I apply for it. I actually got somebody to give me a warm intro to Todd. And I asked if I could get coffee with him or pick his brain, which is the dumbest way to do it. I should have said, hey, I want to work at your company. So luckily he responded and said, do you want a job? Which one? And I said, that one. And he connected me with the VP of product. And so I went interviewed for that job, went through 4 rounds of interviews, and then did not get the job. This is when they had...
Sorry, this is for what role? So they already had a VP of product.
They had a VP of product and marketing, running all of product and marketing. And so they wanted somebody to be their first product management hire, basically the director of product. And they were about 9 people, so very small. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, I got introduced to them. This was after the Series A. You noted that I joined at the Series B. That's because I didn't get the job. I went in, and I think they thought I was a good product management person, but I didn't know this space. I didn't come from cloud or security or identity. We could talk a little bit about what Okta does for those who don't know. And but I really became convinced that they were going to build a real company, an important company, a company that I would want to be a part of, and I can talk about that too. So I just stayed on it, and I just kept hounding them. And a little bit less than a year later, then they did hire me to build the product marketing function. And so I joined when there was probably a couple dozen people, and building out product marketing, which we can talk about for enterprise SaaS, is a specific thing. So did that for 3 or 4 years, and then the opportunity to become CMO was available. We had gone through a couple of marketing leaders, some really great leaders, but maybe not the best fit for us. And I became convinced, I'd been telling the product story for the first 3 or 4 years. I wanted to tell the company story, and I wanted to help build that part out. And so I took a couple swings at trying to become CMO, and then eventually they gave me a shot, and that was over 5 years ago now. And so I've been CMO ever since. And I can talk about all that entails as well.
Yeah, there's one detail here that I think is interesting. So you didn't get the job, but you stayed in touch. That I think is a little atypical, depending on how flagged your effort is, like how you want to keep going, how much you believe in them. And so I guess, what was that like? Is that just like exchanging emails sometimes, like keeping coffee? Like, when somebody says like, no, it can sometimes hurt.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, back in the days when I met you and I was trying to do my first real startup, you were doing fundraising. When a VC would tell me no, I would take it so personally, and I'd like, oh, it must mean that I don't have a good idea. And really, there's a bunch of reasons they'll tell you no that have nothing to do with your idea or your ability to do the job. So I think I learned back then that when you hear no, that's the start of the conversation, not the end of the conversation. And so in this particular case, when they said no, that they were pretty clear. It's that we like you, Ryan. You just don't know the space. So I studied up on the space, and when I found something interesting, I would email it to them, or I'd go off and interview people who I thought could be customers, and I'd send them an email and said, "Here's what I learned about what I think your product could do for these customers." And I just try to do it in a helpful way, not give me the job, but hey, I think what you're doing is interesting, and here's how I can help.
Yeah, this is probably a good time to ask about, just for people that don't know. I've used the product, but also it's evolved over time into more of a platform, which can mean a lot of different things. And so if you could talk about sort of the product, what it originally, the core of it, which still exists, and that's still part of it, and how it's expanded, that could be a good context for asking about, how you tell the story.
Yeah, great question. And great point. So the founders came from Salesforce, and being at Salesforce, they saw that the cloud was clearly going to take over everything and change everything. And so their thesis was, what kind of company could they build that would enable that and take advantage of the transition from on-premise computing to the cloud? So talking to CIOs and people in IT and security, they've quickly figured out that identity was an issue. If you're using 100 cloud apps, signing into each one of them is a pain. So a product, the first Wedge product was single sign-on, a place you sign into once and then you get access securely into all of your cloud apps. And that was really, today, that simple concept has evolved into a set of products that we call workforce identity. So two-factor authentication. Somebody joins your company, will provision and deprovision all of their apps. It's not just cloud apps anymore. It's all apps, even legacy apps. So that was kind of the first real thing we did. But then we realized identity could help in another way. Anybody who's building software needs to connect that software to a user. You have to sign into a mobile app, into a website, into a SaaS application. And much like Twilio for communication or Stripe for payments, we had the opportunity to build a platform that would let you build identity and security directly into your whatever software you're building. So we call that collectively now customer identity, and that's another giant thing that we do. And then on top of all of that, just the move to cloud and remote and every company becoming a software company means security is harder than ever before. And you don't have a network or a perimeter or a firewall that can contain everything, because everything's outside of the perimeter. So zero trust is a term that people use to describe security these days, and identity is a critical part of it. So it's kind of those three things: enabling workers to get to apps, enabling customers to access your software, and keeping everything secure. And that story has evolved a lot over the last 10 years.
Yeah, I don't think I'm as familiar with that customer side. And so how would it compare to, the analog that many people might understand is like Facebook auth. And so you have identity within Facebook that has your name. In some cases, you give your email address and your photos and your profile picture. And interests is all these graph things. And then somebody can authenticate to tell Facebook to give an application that bit of identity. And so I presume when you talk about identity for your customers, users, it's something similar, but can you describe exactly a bit more how that works?
Yeah. So in that example, if you had a website or mobile app and you wanted people to log in using their using Facebook authentication, we would just power that. We'd make it easier. So there's open standards like OAuth and OpenID Connect that you could build yourself, but you can do it faster and easier with us. But probably more significantly, not everybody wants, for a lot of reasons, to be able to use Facebook auth into your app. You want to have a username and password field. Well, you could build all that yourself. There's open source components you can do and libraries, but you can just call our APIs to do that. And then, building authentication into your software seems easy on the surface, but to do it right and to do it securely and to do it in a way that's continuously updated is not easy. And that's what we do. So, like I said, Twilio would let you build SMS or voice communication into your app. Stripe would let you build credit card payment processing in your app. We would let you build authentication with username and password into whatever software you're building.
It's interesting. It's also interesting in terms of the audience because, this is another side of marketing in terms of who you tell your story to, so you have what the product does. And if you're thinking about, companies that use SaaS apps, that's everybody now. Everyone has an IT department that needs to use these products. When you think about how many companies need to have that experience, and especially it seems like a developer experience, it's a pretty different, much smaller audience. Is that fair?
Well, I don't know if I would say smaller, because one way to think about it is every piece of software that has been written that has a username and password field, we can replace that with what we provide. And every piece of software being built should have some way for you to connect to the user of it. So that is a giant market.
I don't mean to say small, but it's like, let's take a construction company. Maybe I'm wrong, because maybe a construction company actually does have some client portal they have to build and implement, and so they need some kind of identity there. And what they're doing on, the actual literally brick and mortar is that doesn't mean they don't have a digital side that they need to make a product for.
Well, so there's this term which I hate, but is used everywhere: digital transformation. And it's just used by every enterprise software company. And I don't like it because it just doesn't have any specificity to it. But there is a real component to it, which is every company is trying to figure out how to become a technology company. The way I prefer it said is what Mark Andreessen said in 2011: software is eating the world. Only the companies that do find a way to use software to enable their business are the ones that are going to thrive. And so, example is Albertsons is a major grocery chain. They have 20 different brands across the United States, and tens of millions of people go to those different websites to log in and sign in and do things like redeem coupons. And all that's powered by us. So is Albertsons considered, a technology company? No, but is that a significant part of how they connect with their customers? Yes. And they need, because they're not a technology company, they don't have a ton of developers to build this stuff. They need to use services like ours to help bring them forward.
Fascinating. Yeah, it's super interesting parts of, when you have normally a developer facing company, if you are a technologist, it's very easy to understand. It's like, I've solved that problem myself. But when it comes to these enterprises, how do you even try to understand a space that you don't work in? Because you're not a grocer, you're not a construction company. There's every business at this point. And so how does that user understanding work when it's almost every company that could be your customer?
This has actually been a significant challenge for us because we got started with what I called workforce identity products. We're selling to IT, and it's a product that you deploy. You're not writing any code. You're configuring our product, and our product is especially easy to do so, and you get it up and running quickly. And then as the problem that we solve is more acute based on the number of employees you have. So the bigger the company you are, the more you need Okta on the workforce side, on the IT side. And so we very quickly, probably more than most SaaS companies, went up market. A lot of SaaS companies will build a product, sell to other SMBs or other SaaS companies, and then as they add more features and make it more resilient and more reliable, they'll sell to bigger enterprises. We went upstream very quickly because we were being pulled there. And so we built over the years a really well-functioning enterprise sales and marketing engine. Because selling to enterprises is, it's been said, you're not figuring out how to sell to them. You're teaching them how to buy. You're navigating their internal processes and all the different people who have to sign off. And so we got really good at enterprise. But if you're really good at enterprise, most often that approach does not work with developers. They don't want to talk to a salesperson. They want to access your APIs using your SDKs and get it up and running quickly. And they want to pay as they go. It's very different. So we struggled in the early days to figure out, how do we really tell our story? We had a great product, I think the developer experience could have been made better. It's probably still could.
What year are we talking about here? Like in terms of like the life cycle of the product?
We probably really, even though we had customers using us this way early on, 2012, we really got serious about this in like 2013, 2014. And and building the product, making the product features such that developers could use it. But we realized we were missing a key component of developer DNA. So we bought a company. We bought a company that was doing nothing but making identity as a platform. It was called Stormpath. And we didn't end up using their product or technology. We infused all of their employees into the different areas of our business. In engineering, in marketing, we have a whole developer evangelism team that's in our marketing function that came from Stormpath and really lives and breathes what it's like to be a developer and helps us talk to them in the right way. And that has moved things forward to the point where we feel like we're now the leader in being a platform for developers to build identity into their applications. But that was tough for us to figure out.
Yeah, that's fascinating. It's also the just touching on the DNA of the company, changing it by sort of like this. There's no good evolutionary context because you don't change your DNA afterwards, but you can like almost like absorb somebody else's identity into you, and then your average gets closer to where you want to be. And it's very difficult to change culture over time too. But that focus on a different kind of customer, I would imagine, requires that shock, like the sudden change in your approach, right?
Yeah, and we were still selling, to the same customers. We'd go to large enterprises and say, look, you're using us. Every one of your employees knows us because they use us to get to their apps. But your employees, you're also trying to build software, and so and we can help you in that way too. So our strength really is that we do both of those things, and our reputation on the IT side. For many of these companies, IT is the development organization. That's not true in a lot of software companies, but it is for traditional companies. And so having that enterprise DNA combined with a developer understanding really helped us there.
So when it comes to reaching either the enterprise or developers, maybe focus more on the developer side. What are the channels? Because I mean, certainly you can help explain someone how to buy, why to buy, and that's more of a conversation you're already having on a phone call, over email, and that's not so much acquiring a customer as it is helping them go through the funnel. But developers, they're like notoriously curmudgeonly here. I was talking to a company that is developer facing that noted 80% of their customers have ad block on. So just like, okay, ads probably going to be inefficient. And I mean, there's probably eras of this as well for when you did different things all the way to a conference you can run. And so just understanding a little bit how you go about trying to reach your customer. Let's say that they haven't heard of you yet, or you're not currently in contact. Like what channels do you use?
I mean, there's so many, and they are different if you're going after enterprise buyers versus developers. And so, if you go to Okta.com, we talk about all of our products for workforce and for customer identity. But we also have developer.okta.com, which is a whole separate site with different content on it. It has a lot of our code examples. It has our SDKs. It has development guides, and it has a completely different tone to it if you go look at the differences between the two. And we push people to those different sites differently. Now, to your point, like, is a developer going to click on a Google ad, like clearly an ad after they search on a term in Google? Probably not. They're going straight to the organic search results. So over the years, we have built up a ton of content. Our developer blog is something we focus a ton on. And then just building up presences on Stack Overflow and Hacker News, and just making sure that the people that because we understand developers more, because we've infused that DNA, we say, what are you reading? Where are you talking to other developers? And try to be there. But try to be there especially for developers, you have to be there in a genuine and authentic way. It can't come across as marketing stuff. It has to be, you have to first have a great product, which we do, and then you just have to make it clear that what that product does and how it can help. And you can't put it in one place, you have to put it in a ton of places. But it is very different for developers versus enterprise for sure.
So do you have like evangelist staff that just spends a huge chunk of time in forums?
Yes. Yeah. And we have a whole developer evangelism team. We have a .NET specialist, a Python specialist, and we hire them because they're well known in those communities. And so are they out there trying to sell Okta? No, they're out there trying to tell people why identity is important, and doing what they do in their communities to begin with, contributing to open source repositories, going and speaking on conferences, and just having people who understand us, who also understand those communities, is the best way for us to do it. The problem with that is you don't get a quick return on it. There's this phrase, the best time to have planted a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is today. You have to get that stuff started early. That's true of, I think many people know that's true of content marketing. You're going to put out a blog post when you have 0 people who read your blog or know about you. It's kind of hard to put something out and get crickets, but you got to do it. And then it just builds up over time. So for us, we've been doing that for a long time, but also, like I said, bringing on that company who had themselves been doing it and already had a reputation helped a lot as well.
Interesting. And not to get too meta, but as one of the first recorded conversations I've been doing, before you have the audience, like, big things have small beginnings, and starting with Powerhouse. So that's super interesting. And so related to that, how do you think about measurement? And so you have, for example, forum posts that you don't track. You don't actually track how many people have viewed something. You can get stats from it. And you want to generally you want to invest in the right places. And so what does that mean? It means if you can spend more time or more effort in a given area, you have a sense of what the return might be. And so the baseline is just, what is the return on that effort? But then the actual strategy is, do I need to dial this up or down or change my approach? But then because it's out there, certainly content on domains you control is much more, you can just measure everything. But how do you think about measurement when it's more out there in the community like that?
So measuring the contribution of your different marketing activities ultimately to what matters, which is creating pipeline for your sales organization, is one of the biggest challenges, I think, in all of enterprise marketing. And we could go for 5 hours on that topic alone, but I'll give you some of the best things that I've learned from that, including some mistakes that we've made. When we measure pipeline for us as a marketing team, we basically say it's what's called a sales accepted opportunity. Somebody in sales has agreed that this lead has a real opportunity behind it. There's a pressing need, they're engaged, and then they'll accept that opportunity. And based on historics, each of those opportunities, based on the company size, has a average dollar value. So we quantify the dollars behind those opportunities in that way. We add them all up based on how big that deal will potentially be, and we try to create pipeline in that way. Now, the challenge can be, you do a lot of different things in marketing. You do a webinar, maybe you sponsor an event, maybe you hold an event, maybe you write a blog post. Customers or prospects may interact with a lot of those things. And then one thing in particular will cause them to become a qualified lead. Let's say I downloaded a white paper and they say, this is interesting, I'd like to talk to a salesperson. Typically, most people will put all the credit for that lead on that white paper. And that white paper downloaded in this example. And they won't either know or they won't give credit to the fact that that same person read a blog post, went to an event, did those other things. So there's this concept called multi-touch attribution, where you try to put credit across all those things. There's whole companies and tools built around that. And we try to use that approach as much as is possible, not to give credit, but to really just understand what works. But then, so I think maybe a lot of people watching this may know all that already. But then you get into this challenge where you'll start to see some things have a higher return than others based upon how you do that attribution. And you'll want to tend to put more things behind the thing, more investment behind the things that had a higher return. And your finance team may come and say, why are you spending all this money on this event when clearly the free trial is the thing that has the highest return? And so I'm sure you're familiar with the portfolio theory of investing money. I always say to the finance person, what was your who asked me, why are we spreading our money across these things? I say, what was your best performing asset last year? I'm gonna say, oh, I bought Apple stock. I'm like, well, I assume you're liquidating everything this year and putting it all behind Apple. And they get the point pretty quickly. Like, you don't know a priori which of these things are going to have the highest conversion, and so you have to kind of spread it in different channels. Now, you should always be measuring them to see, is one, and understand why one's performing more than the other. But you have to constantly be diversifying your investment across all these different channels. And then the thing that I would add to this long-winded answer that makes it even more challenging is that there's a bunch of other companies who are doing the same thing as you. And anytime they find one channel or one activity that converts, they flood it. And then the benefit gets kind of arbitraged out or over-invested out. And so as a marketer, you're always looking for new and different things to add to your channel mix, which is hard because you don't want to put money behind something that's unproven, but yet you have to in order to find new channels that convert. So it's really very complex. And like I said, we could talk about this for hours.
when you're trying to manage all these channels and trying to understand everybody, I generally want to hear about the team, but like, do you have like how much staff do you have, and have you had over time working on the engineering behind this? So it's like the MarTech and like the integration folks, so people that are not building the product but building your sales and marketing like information economy, like the input into that.
Yeah. So we have, I can talk about the makeup of my team and the different functions, but there is a function that reports directly to me, marketing technology. And the woman who runs it, her name is Lauren. She's awesome. And she is responsible for managing the tech stack that is specifically related to marketing and inside sales. I have the SDR team as part of marketing as well. We can talk about that. And the reason that reports directly into me is because I think that's so important. I'm also very personally interested in it. I think it's, if done right, it's a multiplier. If done poorly, it can hold you back. And so that's why I elevated to that level. And her team, I think, is around probably 7 or 8 people. Obviously, we're heavily leveraging SaaS tools for all that we do across marketing, and so it doesn't take a lot to manage those tools. But it's the connection between those tools and the logic behind things like lead routing. Somebody comes to your website and they start a free trial. What do you do with that? How do you give that prospect information about the product as they're using it? How do you funnel that information to the salesperson who can help follow up on it? And how do you do that efficiently and with enough fidelity so that you can measure that, because you want to get data about that over time? That's the harder part about all that, and that's what that team does.
And so for the team overall, like, tell me the shape of the org, at like just how many people are in different roles, for however much detail you can, but then also how that, if the ratios have evolved, like since you were much smaller.
Yeah, I mean, when I joined the company, I was a team of 1. I was building, like I said, the product marketing function, and it was just me. And it's kind of crazy to think that the team that now comprises all different functions of marketing, and I'll explain what those are, is now several hundred strong. I can't give the exact numbers because people are always trying to figure out, as a public company, where do we invest our money? But it's several hundred people plus across the different parts of marketing and inside sales, and it's very interesting for me to see how that has changed over time, how I think about how I contribute, what's important to me, from a subject matter expertise standpoint to just a leadership and hiring and development standpoint. So yeah, that's how it's changed over time. And marketing takes different forms in different companies. So sometimes marketing is really, it's really focused on demand gen and maybe the brand and the corporate marketing and PR. In our case, marketing includes what we call corporate marketing, which is the website, our events, our customer marketing, taking customer stories and making them public. And then our PR team, really communications, which is very externally focused, but now it's also internally focused. We have internal comms. It includes product marketing, so the positioning the product and how to talk about the value proposition, how to price it, how to compete, how to win. Enablement, it also includes the sales enablement function. So taking all of this stuff, and when we onboard new salespeople, or we take existing salespeople and teach them new things, that's a whole function that's under marketing. Sometimes that's under sales or sales ops. In this case, it's under marketing. It also includes, like I mentioned, the developer evangelism team. It includes, we have international marketing heads. I have heads of marketing in Asia and in Europe. It includes the marketing tech stack team that I mentioned as well. And I think that's it, but it's a pretty broad group. Oh, and I mentioned the inside sales team, what are called SDRs, sales development reps. Those are the entry level salespeople who are either outbounding and trying to call into customers or prospects that you want to turn into customers, or that are following up on your marketing leads. That's a very large group of people because in enterprise you have to connect to people with people, and that also becomes kind of like a farm system for your sales team. New people come into your company, they learn the product and they learn sales in this SDR role, and they become some of your best AEs or salespeople later in their careers.
Mm-hmm. So talking about one specific channel that I would imagine takes almost this whole team to manage. So when you run, you call it a developer conference, a user conference, Octane. Yeah, I mean, just what goes into that, and I mean, more recently also is a bit impinged. So I'd love to hear about how you think about putting something on like that. Like, where do you invest? How do you know whether investment makes sense? Like, how you think about quality? All these things around conferences. I find it fascinating because it's relatively easy when you're writing an essay to understand how many people can read it, like where to share this, how high quality should you have? Like you have a bar. But as you get to the more like humans, shaking hands, like it's softer and harder to measure, so harder to know how to do it.
Yeah, I think what you say reminds me of one of my favorite tweets of all time. I'm pretty sure it was one of the Stripe founders, maybe it was Patrick, who said, if you assemble enough enterprise software ads in one place, an airport will spontaneously form around them. And it's kind of like, the cliche is enterprise software companies advertise at airports. I think another cliche is any enterprise software company has to have an annual customer conference. The biggest one that people in San Francisco and this Bay Area probably know about is Dreamforce, Salesforce's annual conference. And so we're no different in the fact that we have one, but I think we're different in the way that we approach it. And so I'll give you some context there. First, I think many people watching this are probably on the earlier side of their companies. They're forming a company, they're getting a company off the ground. And so you might ask, well, when do I start to have a customer conference? And for us, we did it relatively early. We did it in 2013. The company really was founded in 2009, but really started selling in 2011. And so only 2 years after we started selling did we have our first customer conference. And there were 300 people in the audience. And I was doing the demo on the live stage, and I couldn't have been more nervous in front of 300 people. But that, looking back, it was cute how small it was, but it felt big to us. So we've now done, I guess it's 8 or 9 of them since then. And it's grown to be, many thousand people in the audience. You do these big production keynotes. And there's a lot of reasons to do it. First and foremost, it gives you a platform and a stage to launch new products and get a lot of attention for them. And that's probably what most people would look at it for. It's to help position, give your view on what's happening in the world and why your company and your now new products exist in a really high impact way. And so we've always used it for that. But we also, bringing everybody together, we would do it in San Francisco. Sometimes we do it in Vegas, depending upon, schedule and venue availability. Bringing people together, there's a lot of networking and interaction that happens around the keynotes and around the conference that are invaluable. And, hold that thought, because that comes back to what is now a virtual conference out of necessity. But we also do a lot of things like even though we'll have, multiple keynotes on different days, a day 1 keynote, a day 2 keynote, we'll have dozens of presentations by our customers who want to come and share their success. We'll partner with them, and they'll get on a stage with, instead of 5,000 people watching, it'll be in a breakout room, and maybe only 300 people are watching, but they're hearing those customer case studies. That's a way for us to really showcase how people are getting real value from the product, not in our words, but in our customers' words. That's a huge reason to do it. And then this is probably not talked about a lot when you look at customer conferences, because it's all about marketing and getting prospects and getting leads. But the internal value and internal benefit of these conferences, from my perspective, are huge. It gives everybody a focus point inside the company to get products launched, to think about your messaging either for your product or for your company. And it is the employees, if you do it right and if you do it well, they walk out of that thing being so fired up for what they've done to pull it off, and for the opportunity they have in front of them. The soft benefits of how much it can motivate your entire employee base, I think, are one of the not very talked about benefits of doing it, but huge for us. And so our conference week is called Octane, obviously a play on the term Okta. And last year it was about 4,000 or 5,000 people in person in Las Vegas, and we were planning to have, in San Francisco last year. This year we were going to get 6,000 people together in San Francisco at Moscone, and that was scheduled for April 1st. And
amazing timing.
Yes. And so, as we're recording this is the middle of May right now. Every other conference has gone virtual. Here's my puppy.
This is perfect. Yeah. It's the perfect timing too. It's like something that would never happen to you on stage at Octane, but like, when you're at home doing a video, can happen. Very cute dog.
I'll talk about her in Octane too. Every other conference now, from Apple and Google and Microsoft, they've all made their conferences virtual throughout the rest of the year for sure. But when we had to make that decision, it was early on in the COVID-19 pandemic, and you were asking ourselves, should we do this at all? Should we still try to have it in place? And when we made the decision to not cancel it, but to go virtual, you were still allowed to get to shelter in place. Wasn't a thing in San Francisco. So it's still possible at the time we made the call to do it. But we just felt a lot of us were paying attention to this early on, and so we just felt like you could see it coming. And so we made the call maybe about 3.5, 4 weeks before the event to turn it entirely into a virtual event with no playbook on how to do so. And our initial thoughts were, well, we'll still use Moscone because we had it reserved, and we'll just record everybody's keynotes as if there were an audience and then play it virtually. Then shut down Moscone. So we had rented a private sound studio that we could use ourselves in the East Bay of the Bay Area, California. We were going to film it all on the soundstage. But then shelter in place came, so you couldn't even leave your home. And so we then, filmed everything, did everything from our homes. And we had, executives from Google, executives from Apple, executives from VMware who were joining our keynote stage, who would come on the stage and talk about our partnerships. And now we have to navigate that in their homes. We have C-level executives from our customers who are going to get on the stage and talk about what they do. And, for many of them, they're all going through what we were all going through. How do I figure out how to run my company? How do I figure out how to manage my workforce? And now I'm supposed to go join Okta's conference. And so we really had to spend a lot of time convincing them this is the right thing to do. And it was just like one of the most trying exercises that I've ever been a part of. But the team has never felt more like as part of a team and cohesive and just proud of what they pulled off. We asked ourselves, like even a week before, should we really still do this? Is this tone deaf? And one of our guests, we always have guest keynote speakers to complement our message or inspire the audience. And this year we had General Colin Powell. And I got on the phone with him, talked with him for about an hour to let him know about the company, talk about our message. And he actually recorded something for our employees that said, I really think it's admirable that you're doing this. The world needs this kind of stuff right now. In our case, our product can help people who are working remotely. We can talk about that too. But he just said, you got to keep going. You got to keep making things happen, and you can't let things stop you. And that was a message we played internally for the employees. And in hindsight, even though I'm glad we looked at it from all angles, 100% the right decision to do the conference. And really proud of how the team made it a virtual conference.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, what you touched on both for this event, how it played out, and also why to do events as far as the impact of the team. That's the first I've heard of that, and that's very interesting. I mean, generally product launches are, you can think about every push, like every single commit that you do as a launch. And, a lot of people that are focused on iteration speed, they don't really think about big launches. But it's hard to deny the psychological effect of like a big debut for a new product or a big milestone. And then to have this be like at a time when everyone's like afraid and thinking about what they should be focusing on in life, just like to have something to focus on there. That's actually an incredible story.
Yeah. And, you mentioned like the iterative aspect of it. We want to remain as agile as we can. In our product, it's a multi-tenant SaaS product, so there's no versions. It's always just the latest version. We do something like 45 releases a year to our product, and we want to, even at the scale that we're already at, we keep doing that many releases. So we actually have introduced a new event in the fall. Octane is always in the spring. We have an event we call Showcase in the fall, which is not to the same extent, but we want 2 times a year to unveil new products at this scale. And so even you don't have to do something huge to have that benefit. You can do it on a smaller scale as well.
Fascinating. So running up on time, just one last thing I wanted to ask you about, which is around recruiting. And we started the conversation a little bit here in terms of how you joined. So now you're a CMO at a very successful public company. And so it's interesting in terms of what motivates people in this kind of senior position. And a lot of companies, this is often the most crucial decision in terms of the senior leadership you hire. There's almost different kinds of recruiting. There's I need to build out the engineering team and build out the sales team, build out other kind of roles like that. And you hire very many people in that role. So you want to think about process and repeatability and quality. But it's down to like 1 or 2 people on the senior team early on or later. And it's incredibly high leverage and very important. And also like very, very difficult, I would say, relatively. So it's much more soft. So can you talk through a little bit about that, including like how you think about hiring for those senior roles, or what kinds of things you would be looking for in a role?
I mean, as Okta went public in 2017, and as part of that process, we were very rigorous and disciplined in making sure we were ready to be a public company. And part of that is making sure that the executive team was able to be an executive team at a public company. And the vast majority of us had never been a C-level exec at a public company. So we spent a lot of time on that. And one of the things that we were advised to do is go find a mentor, somebody who's been in your spot in the past. And so I tried to do that. And I met CMOs who had taken companies public, but I always found they had something different that they brought to the table. There's multiple different parts of marketing. There's the product centric CMO, comes up through the product management or product marketing organization. There's the demand gen specific CMO who knows every lever to pull to create pipeline using all the different channels and to do so efficiently. Or there's the third typical CMO is somebody who came up from the brand or the PR or the storytelling side and can really help position a company, help create a category, and talk about your company. So I found CMOs who could do all of those things, but not a CMO individually who was good at all of those. So I created this kind of superhero CMO composite. I called it the Gold Standard CMO Project, and I tried to just take the best of everybody that I met and put it into one profile, and then tried to measure myself against that. A key component to that is not every CMO is right for every company. Everybody knows the term product market fit. There's a lesser known term of founder market fit. Why are you the right founder for this market? I actually believe there's a CMO company fit. Are you the right CMO for this company? What do they need at this time? What do you bring to the table that is uniquely suited to what that company needs? And I think that's a big part of hiring leaders in general, not just CMOs. I think Ben Horowitz says, hire in leaders, especially hire for strength, not for lack of weakness. Be aware of a leader's weaknesses because everybody has them, but make sure that you're not looking for somebody who has no weaknesses because you're not going to find that. Know exactly what you need and find somebody who's world-class at exactly that. And so to me, that's hiring leaders is a big part of that. I think one of the challenges is many people hire for not trajectory, but for experience. They want to find somebody to do the job who has done, and they look for somebody who has done that job. And that's a really good heuristic because, you have demonstrable proof that they can do the job because they've done the job. But I've found in hiring, and this is across the board, people with trajectory are typically maybe more hungry. Somebody wants to do the job they've never done before, and you need to find people who have demonstrated the ability to take on more and more and do things in a variety of ways. But that comes with some risk because you may be taking a bet on somebody who's not done the exact job before. But I feel like that risk is always worth it. And I have a bias toward overweighting on trajectory than experience when it comes to hiring, across the board. So hopefully that helps. I think one of the things you were asking too is, me and being CMO, and I have a longer tenure than most CMOs. Sadly, a lot of CMOs are in the job for like 18 to 24 months, probably for a variety of reasons. I'm lucky to have been CMO longer than that. One thing that I've realized, I think there's only two companies in the entire world I want to work for right now, or that I would work for. One is Okta, and one is that I would start myself. And I just feel like Okta has so much in front of us to do and so much that we can still make happen. And I still feel like I can be a small part of that. And so that gets me fired up every day. You were asking me that before we started recording, so I wanted to put that in there.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting in terms of career tracks because careers are so long and think about what comes next. And it's really awesome to hear somebody that so obviously loves their company, loves the mission, and clearly doing something right as far as, there's probably a reason why he lasted longer than 18 months. And I predict it'll last even much further than, some of these companies, the staple Silicon Valley companies are decades and decades of experience under them. So of course they evolve and change over time. But it highlights that, when you find that fit, when you find where you feel like you belong, it's so satisfying and you can get so much done.
Yeah. And one thing I'll note there, the reason I think CMOs have a short tenure is a lot of times, it's obvious marketing is a creative field. And so you have your ideas that you bring in, and then people in general get tied to their own ideas. And so you run out of ideas. And so your CMO may have a short tenure because they genuinely run out of new ideas, and so you stop being effective. But oftentimes what happens is you may have new ideas, but it's coming from the same person, so people don't sound like new ideas. It sounds like just Ryan talking again. And so I spend a lot of time with the team trying to create an environment where they can, the team and the engine and the organization puts out and pulls forth the best ideas. Because if the best ideas are always coming forth and they're not coming from me, I'm still doing my job. And I think that's that's probably true for many fields, not just in marketing.
Yeah, it's definitely true. And I mean, it's a whole other conversation here in terms of what motivates people and what enables them in their positions. But feeling like you have a sense of autonomy and purpose is very, very important. And having that trust in your team that they can come up with the right path. I mean, it's hard because especially if you're very creative and have a bunch of ideas, it's like, well, it's not like you're bad, but you can't like dictate to the team because that will, it's like, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Where you could have the best source of ideas, but then you're going to run out at some point, or you're just going to miss the opportunity because you have the whole team to leverage. And so it's very important to create that creative culture, like a process of taking the creativity and turning it into action. And that's the kind of organization everyone wants to work for.
Totally. I think as a leader, I've become convinced that, certainly the best tactic that you have, but arguably the only real tactic you have to affect all this is the culture. And I mentioned up front that I love reading Ben Horowitz's writing. His most recent book is What You Do Is Who You Are. I got a chance to interview him about that book and talking about company culture, organizational culture, team culture, how important it is, how you measure it, how you can, and the point of his book is how you affect it, how you change it. To me, that is the most critical thing that any leader should be thinking about, even before you've hired anybody. What is the culture of your organization, and how do you really affect it? And it's through your behaviors, not what you talk about. And we certainly, I think one of the reasons I get so fired up about Okta is I love the company culture and the team culture that we have. I'm lucky to be part of as well. I know we are
Awesome.
up against time here, so I want to be sensitive to that.
Yeah, it's a great point to end on. And so thank you so much for taking the time. And where can people find you online? Are you even on VC Twitter? Like where do you go? Like or marketing Twitter, marketing blogs? Like
I'm on best place to find me is probably on Twitter. I'm at Ryan T. Carlson. I don't tweet a ton, but that's where I spend most of the time. So if you want to find me, that's a good place to do so.
Well, thanks again for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks, Yvonne. Good to talk to you again.